Hello and welcome. My name is Robert Ferguson, and this is the Center for American Institutions podcast coming to you from the beautiful Sonoran Desert in Tempe, Arizona. My guest today is Dr. Paula Baker, a very important guest, VIG. Dr. Baker, thank you for sitting down.
Thank you.
Dr. Baker, you've been at the center here for this is your third year, correct?
Correct.
And where were you before you came to the center?
I was at Ohio State University where I taught history, largely political history, the U.S. 19th, 20th century for about 20 years.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. One of your major projects here at the center has been working on these commission reports.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about the background of these commission reports and their relationship with the center?
So these are research topic areas that are in many cases timely. Sometimes we can't quite predict exactly what the public is going to care about at any particular moment, but of possibly timely, certainly of persistent interest. We've done a series of them. The first, which was well on its way before I got here, on teaching American history. And then we turned to civic education in the military, then turn to religion in public life and the importance of nonprofit religious organizations to social welfare and community life, and then one on state Supreme Court justices and how they are appointed, and why these campaigns have become so contentious and expensive.
Right, and that's the one we're going to be talking about quite a bit today. But I want to ask you about your experience as a historian. How does your experience as a historian either help with these reports or give you a different perspective on these reports and the research that goes into them?
Mostly, uh, my MO as a historian was an archive rat. There wasn't anything that I loved more than chasing stuff down. And so all of these topics have been part of, have sort of taken that uh, tendency of mine and made it useful. So
Well, I love you hearing that archive rat. Every archive rat has a great archive story. Do you have a great archive story you can tell?
there were a few where I just sort of like found something I didn't expect to find, or finally found something that I knew this was going to be here. This is going to sound like super obscure, but a 1918 Senate election in Michigan sounds like, why is anyone care about a 1918 Senate election in Michigan? Because one of the candidates was Henry Ford.
Oh my goodness.
And one of the and then there was this kind of, cardboard figure Republican who looked like he just kind of stepped out of some mass production of Republican candidates named Truman Newberry, who and Ford ran because Woodrow Wilson wanted him to run, because he was looking for friendly people on the League of Nations. Ford had this peace um, um, reputation. So this wound up being an election that Newberry won very narrowly. Ford thought he was cheated, so there was a kind of stolen election thing going on. And from there, investigations, the federal government got interested. The When they first failed to bring an indictment, then Ford basically kind of ran his own investigation, found a new prosecutor, handpicked one, and then the feds ran with that case, but would wind up losing the case. Because and
Sorry, the
that's
Ford would lose the case?
this was a case that wound up going to the Supreme Court. The whole complaint here went back to the primary rather than the general election, because Ford, being Ford, couldn't just be a Democrat. He needed to be a Democrat and a Republican. So it went back to primary laws and what was covered in this case. And so in any event, it was both a case that sounded like a lot like, kind of current politics, where, no election is settled. There's, like, the just suits to follow. Then you've got Ford in play here in the league, and it also didn't stop there because once Newberry was seated, the Senate uh, began a series of votes trying to unseat him or deny him his seat. So he technically served for like 2.5 years, and then finally gave up, and then there was a special election.
I'm sure Truman Newberry had a pretty good white shoe corporate law gig he could fall back on.
No, actually, it was a weird thing. He was associated with various kind of nice investments, but he was associated with Packard.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
sort of like, it was like Packard.
Oh, so there's this Packard Ford thing.
Just very strange. The car built for gentlemen by gentlemen versus Ford,
Right.
which was literally one of their ad pitches.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting Democrat versus Republican kind of, motif at the time to some degree.
Although Ford wasn't exactly a Democrat, he was famous at this point for being in favor of trying to find a way to end World War One. And was persuaded to run by Wilson, and according to one of Wilson's associates, asked, "So, what does a senator do? Would I have to be there much?" So, I think he sort of thought he would go and do like one vote and be done with that.
Get to have senator on the CV, the glory of being senator at a very important moment, and then back to running the plant.
Yeah. See, I've got associates. Will like stick them in around DC, and I'll go home.
Fascinating.
But in this case, it was finally finding the materials that laid out what Ford's role was exactly in launching his own investigation, and from there the kind of handoff to the federal prosecutor.
Okay, so you kind of find the smoking gun.
Yeah. So there it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
That's and that's really the dream, right? And for people who've never been in, gone searching in archives before, you kind of you have no idea what's there until you get there, right? And you kind of think you might maybe know what might be there, and so that's why you go and look, but you really have no idea. So when you do find the smoking gun in a place that you're actually looking,
Yeah. Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
that's remarkable.
And in the case of the commission report, the one on Supreme Court justices, it was kind of okay. Pieces are here. I understand what we're saying here about how much more expensive these campaigns have become, how much more politicized they've become. That there were just kind of insane examples like Wisconsin, where every time Wisconsin has a state Supreme Court justice election, and it breaks its previous record for spending, unless Pennsylvania has
Have one of these.
butted in the meantime. Got it. All of that. The advertising is unhelpful. We also did a survey that turned up some unusual stuff where we're surveying American likely voters. They want to vote for their officials. So they want to vote for Supreme Court justices. Do they? At the same time, they also don't want money or special interests involved.
Right.
Yeah, you got one, you're gonna get the others.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little more detail. There was a great Simpsons bit years ago where they do a focus group, and they focus group these children, and they're trying to figure out what new show that the kids might want to watch. And so their survey results says they want a gritty, down to earth show that's also really zany and filled with robots. And that's how the American voter is that.
Yeah.
Have that a little bit, has that feeling going on. So let me just
But I mean, the smoking gun here was trying to figure out why.
right. Oh, okay.
And I finally discovered that the why is because yes, there has been expensive elections in the past, but a real explosion later. The real explosion came with the increasing involvement of state supreme courts and state legislatures, obviously, in redistricting. But state supreme courts, state legislatures had always done this, but redistricting that would then go to the state supreme courts in many cases that sometimes just redrew maps.
Right.
So they became way more important and part of the uh, uh, whole process in trying to win national power.
Right. And, I was going to get to this later, but I think this quote that comes out of the commission report that is really striking is it says, the struggle for state Supreme Courts revolves around political power. And that by politicizing the courts, the ultimate aim remains political dominance. And that appears to be one of the primary, most prominent conclusions from this report.
Yeah, and that was just in no literal archives in this case, but just sort of digging around in terms of so okay, where's the energy coming from, and finally stumbled on both Democratic and Republican organizations that have been really attached to this idea. The Republican organizations had been they will go back to the years of Karl Rove and had been more concerned with electing Republicans to state legislatures.
Hmm.
The Democratic organizations were newer, concerned with how the Republicans were kind of cleaning their clocks
Mhm.
at the state level, and some made redistricting and their kind of major focus. And this is one organization, for example, that Eric Holder heads up.
Hmm.
They actually ran ads recently
Interesting.
with Barack Obama.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Where were the ads run? Do you know?
Someone I forget what television stations,
Hmm. Okay.
but they're TV ads.
Okay. Interesting. Well, we're going to get more into this in a little bit. And this is my way of telling listeners you need to keep listening because this is really fascinating. But I do kind of want to just go back to where this report, the idea for this report came from and how and how the report developed and how you actually constructed the report. So um, where did the idea for this report come from?
Uh, I think just sort of conversations with Don.
That's
And
Don Critchlow, the director of the
yeah,
center. Yeah.
and from there also the experience in Arizona where these normally kind of sleepy retention elections for state Supreme Court justices all of a sudden blew up
Hmm.
in the last cycle, and so it's like, what's happening here?
Interesting. Interesting. So, you mentioned that there was some polling done. How, what did the research process look like?
There, we hired a polling firm. We, working with them, constructed the set of questions. We focused on a number of states and also had a national sample and of likely voters. And so, with between the national sample and the states, had enough representation in terms of gender, race, education, income to be able to make some generalizations about uh, the various populations.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And what did you learn that you sort of expected to learn?
That people prefer voting an elected judiciary as opposed to ones that come through an appointment process. Expected that.
Right.
Uh,
And before, I'll ask you that question, but I do want to, maybe you can explain a little bit that various states have state Supreme Court selected in various ways.
yes. I think there are not quite half do elections. I don't have
No, sure. That's
the
fine.
number off the top of my head. Otherwise, a fairly common system is guided appointments. So there's some sort of body, commission set up for this purpose, uh, and they're staffed in different ways. In the case of Kansas, it's heavily manned by the Bar Association. Other states, they're kind of constructed in various ways. and they make recommendations generally to the governor. Sometimes there's also a vote then in the legislature, but
Mm.
to pass on those appointments. But it's a guided appointment in that way. Some states, one of the states we also surveyed, Virginia, has a legislative appointment. So the state legislature, uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. So, did your findings differ at all across, like, did depending on what their state system was, did that change the results much?
Some. Uh, Interestingly, Wisconsin has seen some of the most, contentious and nastiest elections, but they still support elections.
Hmm.
Uh, I was The level of awareness about how states do their appointments for state Supreme Court justices varied some, but I was struck that, in Wisconsin, and when the survey ran, this campaign was already going on. Close to half still didn't know how their state Supreme Court justices were appointed, which is okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and at the event that we had last week, Brad Schimmel, who was a part of this process, and he was a candidate, one of the candidates in the election, mentioned that in the Green Bay media market, there were literally no ad time left to buy. It was totally saturated with political ad time, and yet
Yes. Yeah. And yet, didn't know this.
no, a lot of people didn't quite pick up on that, and I think that is amazing for people who are political watchers or political junkies, how, some things that I think we sort of take for granted that everybody knows. I'm always amazed at how the general population just hasn't learned it.
There's that, and this is one of those, kind of funky cases of federalism, and I've moved a lot, and, when I first moved to Ohio, it's like, "Oh, we're electing, uh, judges. Okay, judges and justices. Okay, are they?" Wondering why, and you're kind of voting up and down the line, and they, if I remember right, it was a system where there was a primary, and the candidates ran on party labels in the
Mm,
primary, and then in the general, the party labels disappeared.
that's interesting.
And I wondered, was there what's up with that? But did I know that before I moved to Ohio? No, lived in other states with different systems, and if I had been surveyed upon moving to Ohio, and so how do they select it in Ohio? I don't know. When I first moved there, because
Three-legged races on consecutive Sundays until a winner is declared,
pretty
right?
much,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I did interrupt you. What were some of the other things that you expected to find?
Expected people would be upset about money in elections because they're generally upset about money in elections. Expected to see, and this was fairly pronounced, to kind of wash over from the U.S. Supreme Court. And even though we were kind of quite clear in the questions about that we're talking about their state Supreme Courts, people would often, react to, or trust or distrust, in this case, mostly distrust their state Supreme Courts, depending on what they thought about the federal court.
Mm.
So there was an option to leave comments about what caused you to lose trust in your state Supreme Court, and we would get there were comments like Roe versus Wade, Biden, Trump, someone who complained about grocery prices.
Well, I mean, that is a little odd, but
Yeah, but some that really, like, mentioned a case in their state, but on the whole, people, just sort of let those 2 things kind of bleed together.
interesting. So I think, what you're seeing is not only are voters or citizens' views on state institutions being colored by their federal institutions, their state politics are being consumed by their federal
Yeah.
politics too. on the national.
Everything is federalized. Everything
Right.
is nationalized. And that's
Well, that's really bad. There's real that's really bad
yeah,
because obviously, we live in Arizona, and I can think of one issue that is a very, a state issue that is not necessarily on the national radar or doesn't necessarily split neatly into national blue and national red. It's like water issues,
right.
right? That's a very state-driven issue. There's state interests here, and it's regulated at the state level large. I mean, I know there's federal agencies that do it too, but it's a
Yeah, and also a kind of regional compact and all that kind of stuff.
correct, yeah. So, but I mean, it's hard to draw that into a national red-blue paradigm,
Right.
yet that's how voters think.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is that you could see how that might make it harder to solve problems, or deal with important questions like water development, in a state because the real juice comes from federal issues or culture war issues,
Right.
and you know,
Yeah, absolutely. But we are going to talk about, we're going to try to keep this to courts, and
okay.
I have a tendency to go wherever I want to go, so I'm going to try to keep it related to the courts. So what were some of the unexpected things you found from the report?
Well, we did the survey, and we asked people how they got their information about their courts. And, it didn't dawn on me to include advertising in one of the questions, mostly because I sort of just figured no one ever would say that they actually learned stuff from advertising. People tend to wanna deny that.
Right.
And the number one, thing turned out to be local news, local TV news,
Interesting.
more than local newspapers, and then people, mentioned, national or electronic sources and that sort of thing. And particularly odd because the group that claimed they followed the courts most closely were young voters. And like young voters and TV news don't really go together.
Especially local TV news that
Yeah.
hasn't, yeah.
Uh, so that was just puzzling.
Interesting.
And so don't really, I wonder if people were beginning to kind of blend together advertising and news,
Maybe.
especially if it was like wall to wall.
Right, yeah.
Here's your 5-minute kind of dose of advertising.
Right, yeah, no kidding. Oh my goodness, yeah, I mean, yeah, the political ad segment are gonna be as long as as long as the actual news segment.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, what are some of the most prominent findings of the report?
For me, it was this process of nationalization
Hmm,
that has taken over these campaigns. We're likely to see. I mean, I don't. Republicans have been talking about. I'm not sure how what their follow through has been like. There's a retention election in Pennsylvania coming up in November that brings where I think it's two or three the justices are up for retention, and Republicans have vowed to like kind of mount a serious vote no.
so
Um,
what's a retention election?
at that point, it's up or down.
Okay,
So they've already been through in Pennsylvania's case, they do partisan elections. Wisconsin's hilariously are nonpartisan, but in Pennsylvania they're straight up partisan. And starting in, I think it was in the 1960s, instead of once their 10-year term is up, they can run for reelection, and they would run. Uh, Instead of running in another partisan race, there would just be a kind of up down, yes, no, retention,
okay, and if
or
no, then new partisan race.
yes, they would be in Pennsylvania replaced by the governor. They would find that the governor would appoint a replacement, and then there would be a regular partisan race in like the next
When the
cycle.
cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, okay. As as this becomes nationalized, what are the national issues that people are seeing that that they care the most about with the courts? Like, what are the issues that people really either that's either causing them to like the courts or dislike the courts, distrust the courts?
Well, there is the bleed between the national and the state, and so that's one issue or problem. Abortion has been, an enormous issue once we got the Dobbs decision, and states were dealing with the question. Um, there was a lot of activity in the state Supreme Courts. My guess is that will kind of get settled out.
Mhm.
There only so many times to revisit probably, so that may be uh, uh, coming onto its last legs as. But I mean, it's been huge in the last couple of cycles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just think, you're taking this, massively contentious national issue, and then you're gonna kick it to the states.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a contentious issue at the state level too,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Right.
Right.
And so that was, and otherwise the preponderance of, advertising goes to, there are the kind of happy, smiley biographical ads, cares for about justice and all that.
Wheat fields,
Yeah,
farmer,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But the negative ads are huge, especially the negative ads are a specialty of outside groups and rather than the candidates' own organizations. So, um, and they tend to focus on crime. If there's any, heinous crime that was committed that wound up before a sitting judge, who may well have decided on the basis of the law in this case, but let go.
Right.
So there's the kind of crime ads, and any inkling of corruption is the other.
Okay.
You know,
Okay. That's, yeah, okay.
and watch enough of them, and you wonder. Like there was one quote from a candidate in Pennsylvania saying, I've seen these ads, and I wouldn't vote for either me or the other guy by the time they're done. Yep.
Well, I mean, I think Brad Schimmel mentioned, again, the candidate in Wisconsin. He said that he was mortified. Maybe mortified is too strong a word, but he was really upset by some of the outside spending that was done on his behalf.
Yeah,
And he thought it just it and, these people that are running for state Supreme Court, they're not typical politicians, right?
right. They shouldn't be.
They should That's the idea, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think there is this idea, and maybe it's getting more traction now, but that judges are just politicians in robes.
yeah, yeah.
And is that do you sort of see that? Did that sort of emerge as how people may have seen their local judge or their judges or state judges?
Oh, I suspect so. And there's one question that I thought about raising with our panelists at the luncheon was so if we're going to have elections, why not just do them partisan and be completely okay, and in fact nearly demand that the candidates tell us their point of view on issues, right?
And but that just makes them politicians,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Right.
And
And that is not the frame of our government.
right, right. And how do judges necessarily feel about that? Do we know, like, how they feel about being maybe forced to become these sort of quasi politicians in order to interpret the law? They're not
I
making the law; they're technically interpreting it.
Yeah, my guess is there are some who welcome it and some who think it's terrible.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That we didn't survey.
Yeah, well, no, that's true. That
Yeah,
wasn't the goal of that. I was
that would
that
be a
that that
good question though.
um, but so let's talk about partisanship. Did partisanship, play a role in how people, and whether people trust their state supreme courts or whether they distrust their state supreme courts?
Yeah, I mean, especially to the extent that there's a washover with the um, uh, U.S. Supreme Court. Republicans were somewhat more confident, found their state Supreme Courts to be more trustworthy than Democrats did. And I suspect that a chunk of that was the reaction to the Dobbs decision. And people in their comments also mentioned, Citizens United. If we had surveyed a little bit later, we might have had um, Republicans upset with the behavior of the federal judiciary in blocking Trump's policies, and so they may have seen their distrust get more pronounced.
Hmm. I mean, I think, and we're stepping outside the bounds of the commission report here, but there, you know, in my experience, virtually every committed Democrat I've met in my life has said that the courts always rule against us. And virtually every committed Republican I've ever met in my entire life says the court always rules against us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, h- how do we get out of that?
Um, there, I'm wondering if it's actually particularly new, or at least once we get to a point when political decisions become something that the courts engage in, where the courts, the idea that in the federal Supreme Court that they would stay away from purely political issues, and those were questions for the political branch, that began to kind of break down. There are always going to be contentious social issues that don't pop up that often, but when they do, as in Roe and Dobbs and civil rights cases of um the 50s into the 1960s, that all of those are, you know,
Hmm.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true.
And
And
I don't know, is that grousing wildly different from, the refs are always against us?
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I've never met an Ohio State football fan who would ever say something like that.
yeah, all right, or for that, I don't, but you're a fan of the
The Georgia Bulldogs, yeah.
got the Georgia Bulldogs, and there Ohio State people could say, well, but they just have criminals.
Yeah, well, there's that. Well, most Ohio State fans are still upset about the non-call on the penalty on Marvin Harrison in the 2022 Peach Bowl game. So
Well, so, and I'm sure that Toronto Blue Jay fans know that the umpires, are for.
sure, right. They're still upset about the non-triple play call in the 1992 World Series. I can assure you.
Yeah. So I mean, some of it is just, the refs are always against
Sure,
us.
sure, and of course, each side, each political party, it benefits them, helps them raise money, that kind of thing, by encouraging that,
Sure.
notion. Okay, so I want to get back to this notion on the struggle for political power,
Mhm.
because again, we there's sort of this notion on abortion that like abortion is the big issue, these major social political issues that are in front of the court, they're the public facing issues. Citizens United, another perfect
Mm.
example. But in the report, redistricting is the issue.
Yeah, it's rare. It gets talked about some in campaigns for state Supreme Court justices in election states, but they don't make a big deal about it. They're not running wall to wall ads about that versus crime or corruption. But it is the thing that really draws the activist money, because here's political power.
Right.
So,
So let's back. What do we mean when we're talking about redistricting?
okay, we're talking about redrawing both the state legislative district boundaries and congressional boundary in ways, since and we've gotten very good at this, maximize the number of seats that are likely to go to my party.
Yeah, right, right. So you go, and what I was gonna, uh, you get these really oddly shaped districts that seem to make no geographical sense whatsoever.
Right.
And the only reason they make sense is they're trying to capture a certain voter profile
Mm.
in that district. The communities that are in that district have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Right. Okay. But what's the court's role here?
Well, a couple of things. One is states do have their own. If we're talking about U.S. Congress, there is, a constitutional, provision, but and states have their own provisions that on principles like compactness, which is supposed to be a good thing. The size, in terms of population, needs to be made uniform Some states have additional rules about aiming toward competitiveness as a goal.
So the rules, the rules exist, but the rules need to be interpreted.
Right. And
Right.
so a new map comes up. Once the map is drawn, it is kind of instantly litigated.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
so off it goes from there, either potentially to a federal court if there's a federal issue, and there would be a federal issue if you could make a claim about racial redistricting, or under the Voting Rights Act.
Right. So what's racial redistricting?
You've drawn districts in a way that don't allow minorities to elect uh, candidates that of their preference.
Okay, so the idea being that, you might have a minority community and and you draw the districts as such so that like this one very clearly minority community is cleaved off into like 12 different congressional districts.
That could happen, or that's one way of doing it. Another way is to pack them all into one district.
Okay, yeah.
So there's cracking or packing.
Oh, okay, interesting. I never heard that phrase before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the way up through the, early 1900s, North Carolina had the Black Second, which was the congressional district where that black people were going to get their representative in, but that was the only place they were going to do it, right?
And so that's packing. There's also cracking.
Cracking, yeah.
So
Interesting. Interesting. And so you mentioned that a lot of the motivation, when most people think of this, they think of this happening at the state legislature level,
mhm.
right? And this is why
And
the
that's where it starts.
and that's where it starts, right? So you mentioned that, this goes back to Republican activities in the aughts under like Karl Rove,
Yeah.
so that the Republicans were emphasizing winning state legislative elections
Hmm.
in order so that they could continue to control the state house, but then also control congressional redistricting for Washington.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the Democrats felt like they were on their back foot.
Right.
Okay. And so their response was instead of matching, maybe doing some of that,
Hmm.
but they felt like the courts might be a better.
Yeah, because it's quicker, fewer people, and finding local candidates is for state, state rep is that's hard.
Oh, yeah, right, okay. Ca candidate recruitment has never been easy. Not only do you have to find somebody willing, but somebody who might be attractive,
Right. Yeah.
and then somebody who can also then go campaign,
Right.
which is difficult. Okay. So, when did this really from what you're from the commission reports, when does this really kind of emerge as being a strategy for redistricting through the courts?
I'd have to check on that date.
Okay, sure.
But these organizations get launched, I wanna say, I mean, it's obviously post-Obama. I think it's the kind of late, 2010s or something like.
So it is a very recent
Yeah,
phenomenon.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And is it happening only, so far what you've seen, is it only happening in the states that have judicial elections, or is this something that's going on in other states with a guided appointment process?
Uh, to some extent, also guided appointments, so there was, I mean, Arizona was one case where, in the last election or last retention election, there seemed to be some possibility of potentially turning back to conservative justices because of a controversial vote on abortion issue. And so this got turned into, oh, those justices said that we supported the territorial law that kind of banned all abortions and criminalized everybody.
Right. In like 18, the 1875 territory or
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, I don't know what that
yeah,
date is, but
but and which it isn't, of course, what what state Supreme Court justices do. They they don't pass legislation or anything like that. But it was a much more complicated story. But it was one you could boil down to that. So I mean, basically, the state court was left with there was a territorial law that was kind of re-upped by Democrats actually in the 1970s. And then, and so that sat on the books. And when the state legislature uh, passed a 15-week
Limit.
limit, the justice didn't bother to repeal the earlier act. And so they were like deciding on law, not their kind of personal preferences for abortion policy. But it was easy enough to package that way and advertise that way, and that's what happened.
And yet, but the issue the activists care about
Yeah. And
is
so that you could get people fired up, maybe turn out on this abortion question, as misleading as it might be.
and because redistricting is a hard thing to motivate voters to come out on.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost analogous to my mind to national political campaigns that try to run on the idea that this is an important election because there are likely to be openings on the U.S. Supreme Court, and that is really going to matter to us. So that's like two levels of abstraction,
Right.
and it really doesn't get people, out.
Right. Well, I think that's when you see somebody who has maybe lived their lives in politics without being outside their life much in politics,
Yeah,
and understanding the real concerns of,
yeah,
or how voters actually think, or what voters actually
yeah,
want.
yeah.
From your perspective, what are there any reforms that leap to mind that can be made?
If states, aren't in an election system, I would recommend against going to one. The advertising is insane. It doesn't teach voters anything about either, except, if you were really, a court watcher and knew how to sort of parse what they're saying, that would get us to judicial philosophy or something like that. You're not learning anything about them from the ads, and this is often sort of downright misleading. So if you're not in one, don't go there. One state is looking to do that, and probably they'll be sad. I don't think there's any way to go ahead and limit spending or the sources of spending, and outside groups are going to spend as they will. The courts themselves could do a better job at educating the public about what they do. And that would be sort of their own use of media to, explain decisions, explain, kind of what they're up to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, those seem good to me. I mean, as good starts, anyways. There's also this idea I think that judges kind of live. The communication thing I think is really
Yeah.
interesting. There's this idea that judges kind of live in an ivory tower, and they don't really. They see things through a very what's an obvious jurisprudential lens to them,
Mhm.
but to the average person is completely foreign.
Yeah, and as a court of, as an appeals court, they're deciding legal questions, not questions necessarily or usually of fact, although the pattern of fact might be part of an appeal that goes up.
Right, right. But the voter is not gonna the citizen who is then gonna read about this particular case or
Cares
this
about the
particular
outcome. Yeah.
cares about the outcome.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's a role for education for citizens and
Mhm.
more civic education. I mean, I think
Absolutely.
that
That's absolutely true, and just sort of basic civics.
right. So where can people find this report?
They could find it on our website.
The Center for American Institutions website?
Yep.
Okay, and it's about 90 pages, I think, but it's not that much text.
We've got tables, we've got
Yeah.
pictures, we've got
Well, this is a very attractive document, I must say.
and screenshots of scary ads and
Yeah, and, particularly maybe we'll just finish with, o out of this process, what what are the most important things people should know about their courts, about their state courts?
uh I think what they should come away with is that most judges, we assume most of the time, don't first and foremost see themselves as political creatures. To the extent that begins to happen, we're in trouble. I don't think we're there. We could be heading there, though, and that would be a terrible thing. And also, which goes to another point, that the wisdom of the Constitution's design in the judiciary as a separate, uh, co-equal branch gives the courts a, kind of non-political role, not one of the, policy branches, political branches. And that too is something that we should stop and appreciate the wisdom of that design rather than simply in a kind of nihilistic way. It's all political anyway. So that is, that may happen sometimes, but it's something we should condemn, and it's something we should try to fix, not something we should, from there go ahead and try to encourage.
Well, Dr. Baker, thank you very much for taking some time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.